going to do once it's up.
So,
All right.
hi, welcome back to Foresight Paradigm. This is Quarantine Conversations number 12. I'm here with Rudy Bee, Jon Hammond, and off the chain, Thomas Bear. How is everyone?
Doing
Doing all
well.
right.
Good.
You forgot the
Excellent.
atheist at the end. It's off the chain atheist.
Uh,
Right.
So,
okay, so I'm going to open with a very short kind of historical story. In 1755 in Lisbon, Portugal, there was an enormous earthquake that basically shook Europe in more than one way. So this was on All Saints Day, and everybody was like in church. And what happened is a lot of people in church got crushed, and people noticed afterwards brothels were left intact. And also people had candles out because it was All Saints Day, and like it
Right.
started a big fire. And then we had a
So,
big tsunami that came after that. So this was kind of like a microcosm or a snapshot of, the indifferent universe that we live in. And even people like Voltaire, who seemed to remain a deist after that, he was shook by it. It kind of, shook his belief in some type of deistic God.
mhm.
So that's going to be our first topic is the indifferent universe. And to me, it's one of the most basic things you can observe if you're observing objectively about the universe. So what are your thoughts about that? Just the tactics that theists try to use to kind of deny that, and just your overall observations about it.
All right. Well, who should we start with?
Go
oh, you
for it.
started talking. Go ahead. Go for it, John.
All right. Well, the universe certainly seems indifferent to me. It seems to be a lot more cause and effect than I care what happens. I've heard it spun any number of different ways. It's like, when someone's kid dies, it's always like, God has a plan for your baby, and it, you know, eh. Like that's actually really obnoxious to hear that sort of shit, but like it's kind of their way of trying to be comforting, um and I think not really realizing how messed up what they're actually saying is.
Right.
hmm
Yeah,
I
definitely.
I think a lot of it has to do with sort of the uh, paying attention to the hits more than the misses, as far as
Yeah.
thinking that
Yeah.
things are happening in a way that is significant or in a way that is purposeful. And whether you're talking about blessings or karma, um, people will see, oh, that person was shitty to me, and now something shitty is happening in their life, and that was supposed to happen. Or they'll see, oh, I did a great job, and such and such happened, and that was, the universe looking out for me, or whatever, or God, or whatever their um, specific belief is about basically things working out in very specific ways to either help or harm people. But
Right.
really, if you just look at the sum total of all of those events, it's like bad things and good things.
Right.
Right.
It's, I mean, you can try to look for the things that seem purposeful for whatever reason you assign to it. You can assign meaning to pretty much anything, but at the end of the day, you can't count on so many bad things happening and so many good things happening and only good things happening to good people or people that follow a specific religion or anything like that. I mean, there are people in pretty much every religion that have gotten COVID-19, even though lots of different religions are claiming that they are protected because of their specific religion or their specific sect
Right.
of Christianity or whatever it is. So it
Yeah.
seems pretty obvious that uh, nobody's god is specifically protecting any specific group of people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there
And it's
definitely is
almost.
favoritism.
Go ahead.
Oh, it's definitely not a case of favoritism. They're going about it with, a preconceived notion, a confirmation bias, and kind of ignoring the fact that what is good for one person isn't necessarily good for someone else. It's a subjective viewpoint. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, back to you.
One thing they'll say is, a lot of suffering has a purpose or a positive lining to it.
Right.
And I want to ask, a kid being run over by a car, how does that what purpose does that serve the kid? Or
Right.
birth defects.
Cancer.
How does that serve?
Bring them closer to God.
The only reason I don't
Yeah.
like asking those questions is that if you meet someone extreme enough, they will actually try to come up with an answer.
Yeah.
And it's
I've
like,
heard
no,
that's
that's
all
fucked
kinds
up.
of shit.
Just stop.
I think
Mhm.
the majority of religious people never think about it that deeply, in my experience. Some of them definitely do, but I don't think the majority of them really do. Yeah.
At least not
But
the ones that bring platitudes. I don't think they've
right.
got it.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys have ever heard of a book by Bart Ehrman called God's Problem. He talks about suffering in the Bible, the biblical explanations for suffering. And guess what? They're contradictory.
Yeah.
So you'll have some writers say it's a punishment,
Surprise,
some say
surprise.
it's a test. Yeah,
Yep.
some say it's punishment, some say it's a test, some say, God will put it all right in the end, the apocalyptic type of authors. So no clarity there, not, you know, another failure of the Bible.
Right? Who would have
Uh,
guessed?
yeah. Already mentioned COVID. Churches have become hotspots now. People think that their God is going to protect them no matter how many times it's demonstrated to them. No, he's not, you know. And did he create the virus in the first place? You know, all we got to do is look at any, event in history. Look at the Black Death that slaughtered how many Christians? Uh,
Yeah.
you know,
And they made it so much worse by killing off people's cats.
yeah,
So the rats proliferated and the fleas proliferated,
Oh.
and then
I
bubonic
forgot.
plague. So
I'd
too.
forgotten that little tidbit of information.
yeah. And of course, they went around killing Jews and killing heretics and did all
Mhm.
kinds of things. It just exacerbated the situation, definitely.
So brutally.
Another thing with the Trump, the COVID thing, I don't know if you guys, this is not exactly related, but how Trump is politicizing science, and he just
Oh.
kind of made this law trying to
Yeah.
bypass the CDC, and so people can't see the statistics. That's extremely scary. Any
Yeah.
thoughts on that? Like,
Oh.
Well, I definitely think pulling out of the World Health Organization's a mistake, and
yeah,
actively trying to be like, don't listen to the scientists. They can't be the judge of when it's okay to send your kids back to school. It's like, are you kidding me? Who the hell else would know?
Right.
yeah,
Really?
I mean, fundamentalist evangelicals have been slowly, not even slowly, really, working their way into controlling the Republican Party for a while.
Yeah.
yeah,
And
Oh, wow.
with religious fundamentalism, you get a certain amount of science denial that just comes with being a young Earth creationist. And it's like this ripple effect of like, okay, so these are the people that are making up this party, and they already don't believe certain aspects of science just because it contradicts their beliefs. So then they don't trust science in general, and then it's just like, and now you've got this problem. Because I think that even though, um, even if Trump were in office, if the Republican Party wasn't being so controlled and dominated by evangelical Christianity, I don't think there would be quite as much science denial, because he's not exactly. I don't think that he holds very strongly to many of his beliefs. If it was the majority of his party were pro science, he wouldn't be going so far as he is right now.
I think you're
yeah.
right. Yeah.
Which leads me
Just
to the
because
Will Smith quote
of-
recently. I don't know if you guys checked that out or not, but
Yeah.
he had a CNN interview and he was talking about Trump, and he said, this is the learn the lesson that we don't want to elect people that are godless and with no. Well, he said they don't have God or love in their heart,
I think
and
it's very. So sorry. Go ahead.
I was infuriated by that. I think Will Smith's God is very vague and kind of, maybe even pantheistic. I'm not sure. I've heard he was a Scientologist. It really doesn't matter. Why is there no backlash about that? Against any other group, there's backlash, which is good. If it
I
was a
think
Jew or
for most like normal everyday Christians, if somebody, I mean, they equate God with love. So if it's like, so if saying somebody with no God or love in their heart is redundant, I don't think he even necessarily literally meant like you should not vote for an atheist, but
he
that's
clarified, he said,
obviously
I
what
don't
he's
mean
saying.
he clarified later. He said, "I don't mean religion or church," which made it worse because he was, further specifying
Mhm.
God. If you don't have God, I mean, it's okay if you're not religious, but God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what
Wouldn't
can we
matter
do
which
about
God you
this? Kind of
believe in.
change this? Yeah. What can we do about this? I mean, just activism. I mean,
I
this
think
is
that
not the only incident like this, and it kind of pisses me off, and I wonder what can we do?
there is something very specific to, strangely enough, to the black community that is sort of like, if you there are some people who will essentially take away your black card if you're a black atheist because religion is so fundamental to at least the American black community. I'm not sure that it is that way everywhere, but
Yep.
so it's almost kind of just like a platitude for him to say. So I think that to some degree we just need more positive atheist activism, but I think specifically in the black community with it's something that would go a long way just to say like you can exist like this and still be a good person. You don't have to go to church, you don't have to believe in a God, you don't have to believe in some supernatural higher power, whatever,
Hmm.
and still be like you can have love in your heart without having God in your heart demonstrably.
Well, they think they own love. They think,
Yeah.
they're the same thing. But
Yeah.
they don't
So,
realize their God has been the problem that's gotten in the way of so much progress. And, their God supports slavery. I mean,
Yeah.
um, Atheist Republic did a really great little video on this. And they kind of just tore this apart. It's really good. I recommend you guys see it if you haven't. Um, but yeah, so that'll take us kind of into our next topic, truth and purpose. So why should we care about truth? Anybody? Why should we care
Well,
what's true?
the more things that we assume to be true that in fact aren't, the more skewed our perception of reality is, the more likely we are to make just flat out the wrong decision because we're basing it on inaccurate information. And that's
Yeah.
like unilateral across the board, whether you have any specific beliefs or not, just basically all of our decision-making processes to me should be as formed by as many true things as possible so that we
Yeah.
can trust our own judgment to be
right.
making as close to the right decision as possible.
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah.
Piggybacking off of that, I think that that comes back around to why it's so detrimental that science is being politicized right now.
Right.
Because it's like, this is just factual information about the world that we live in. It's not a party thing. It's not it has nothing to do with the way you look at the world. It's like, it's either true or it's not. And the fact that it has become masks should be uh, a medical safety precaution, not a political statement. And yet it is at the point
Yeah.
now where I live in a small town in the Midwest. So I always feel like if I have to go to the grocery store and I wear a mask every single time, and I'm
Hmm.
surrounded by people who are not. Like I see maybe a handful of other people anytime I go out shopping that are wearing a mask. And it's like, I get that
Hmm.
you're all conservatives. I get that half of you are Trump supporters, but like, we're talking about public health and safety. This isn't
It-
a party
Yeah.
issue.
Well,
I
there's been a
think
lot
part,
of research done that when people vote, what they vote by is basically, are you on my team or not? They don't even vote for their best interest if they even know what it is. They vote based on who's on their team.
Hmm.
So, you know, we see that everywhere. Go ahead, Thomas. You
I
trying to?
think part, I think part of the problem with the whole, the amount of science denial that we have, it ties into what I believe is the intentional dumbing down of America. Uh, the powers that be, corporate, powers that be, they don't want a populace that's well educated. They want you to be just smart enough to go to work, go home, go shopping, get distracted by NFL on Sunday, and keeping up with Kardashians, uh, keeping up with the Joneses, and worse than that, not just keeping up with the Joneses, but surpassing. Oh, my neighbor's got a
Yeah.
Volvo. I need to get BMW. You know, uh, because they know that if the masses, if the majority of people knew, was awake, really. So I hate really using that term woke. so many people that say they're woke aren't. Uh, but it is, I don't know. I retracted my thought there. Sorry. um,
Yeah.
yeah, they want you just. They don't want. They know that if we realize, what's really going on, that we're not going to put up with them as much. This whole thing with Trump has woken more people up, but I'm afraid that not enough people have.
Yeah.
Mm.
Going back to the truth thing, what I would say is truth gives us leverage on the future. It enables us to alter reality instead of being swept along by it. You know what I mean? And it's the method that we improve the indifferent universe, that we live in. And it's the only thing really that's ever done that. It's having accurate information, and when you have your beliefs not tied to reality, that can so often lead you obviously to bad ends. So this is kind of basic logic, but a lot of people don't get it. Um, so going on to purpose. What do you say to people, that say, we hear it so often, if you don't have a master, basically, if you're not a slave with a master, basically, if you don't, this is what it sounds like, you don't have God in your heart, you have no purpose. What do you guys say to that?
Well, I think our purpose is defined by the individual. I mean, our experience is totally subjective. Our morality is totally subjective, which I'm sure we'll get to in a minute.
Yeah.
So, like, the only thing that really matters is the thing that matters to the things, rather, that matter to you most while you're here. I don't think that our life is a dress rehearsal for something better. I don't think I'm going to incorporate in some new form. I think that this life is what I got, so I want to try to have as much fun as possible and try to enrich the lives of as many other people as possible, because it's the only thing that matters from my perspective while I'm here,
Yeah.
you know?
There are
And
lots of theists that would say that because of that limited amount of time, it makes it meaningless because, oh, you just do whatever you're going to do and that's it. You're gone. It doesn't matter. But I
right.
think that they're looking at it from the perspective of as if they were a god. Like if I'm
Ah,
if I'm God, your life you do this and that and then it's over and that's it. Like you watching the lives of ants in an ant colony. You know, it's
Yeah.
like
that
every little ant it lives and dies and it's like whatever. They helped their queen, they helped their other ants, but those ants are gonna die too. Whatever. But they're not
Yeah.
looking at it from the perspective of being that ant, of living, doing whatever they can for the colony while they're around, just living their life and being as much as they can be and doing as much as they can do in the short time that they have. It's like I'm looking at it from the perspective of my own actual life. And yeah, it matters to me, and that may not mean anything in the grand scheme of things, but it doesn't have to for it to matter to me. And I'm the
exactly
only one that has to live it. So
right,
Yeah.
right.
I read a statistic that about 107 billion people have lived and died, and we got about 7 billion that are alive today on this planet. Does it really make sense that some deity is, taking names and attendance and looking at the daily lives of each one of them? That's just this one planet. We got billions of planets and maybe other universes. It's
Right.
really absurd. It's absolutely absurd when you think about it. Um, uh, Definitely. So a couple quotes that I have from my book. One quote that I have is basically, if you're looking for human compassion, human purpose, human morality, look to humanity. That's where we know all of this stuff emanates from. The only place we know it exists. You
Hmm.
know. So, and when you do something against humanity, don't apologize to a deity. Apologize basically to humanity. And on related to the purpose thing, you know, I think it's the last line of my book. I'd say if people ask me, don't you want to have something greater than yourself? And I'm like, yo, I do. I had the whole universe, all of reality, everything that comprises reality, and
Yeah.
progress, humanity, all these things that are bigger than me, much bigger than me, that I care, deeply about. So, and human beings are we're pattern seeking, we're purposeful, social creatures. It's part of our nature. Uh, so on a related note, morality. How do you guys define morality?
Again,
What do you
I'm
think
thinking
morality
subjective.
is? You think it's subjective?
Yeah, I do.
I don't know if I can even really define morality in the sense of it being objective or subjective, because there's ways that I could see it interpreted both ways.
I agree.
I would say
I agree with that.
my morality is based on trying to better myself and others to the degree that I can, and not causing harm to others and or myself, I guess, for that matter. Um, and
Yeah.
most people, to whatever extent they know that to be true, probably view their morality the same way. Whether or not they are necessarily conscious of or have put that into words, that's probably how most people view their morality, unless they're very strict about religious rules. It doesn't matter what your conscience tells you. It's just like, okay, I have to follow these rules. But that aside, as far as just people making up their own minds, it seems like just trying to do good for yourself and for others and trying not to harm yourself or others seems to be the best basis for it. And as long as we all agree on that, it would be objective. Because then there are objectively, you can say, once you have that goal established, that, like, okay, if our goal is just to not do harm to each other and to benefit each other as much as possible, then you can objectively determine whether or not whatever decision you're going to make is going to match that goal or not. But
Right.
that isn't really everybody's, measuring stick for morality. So in that case, it's subjective just because we don't all agree on that.
So once you've agreed on the
Yeah,
game
and I
that you're
think
playing,
that
there's objective moves.
applies to. Sorry.
But I think that most people do agree because we have a common evolution and a common humanity. And that's kind of the part that makes it objective. I mean, unless you're crazy, there's just basic, needs and desires and drives that we have. And there are better and worse ways to achieve well-being, and we're interconnected and interdependent. Try to live on an island and don't depend on anybody ever. I mean, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah, it's hard.
yeah, to me,
My dad
that's
lived
the objective
like
part of it. What's that?
Said my dad lived like that,
Oh,
pretty
really?
much alone on an island in the middle of nowhere. And
Right.
yes, it is very hard.
And I don't see how obedience or authority could be morality. I mean, it's really an abdication of morality if you think about it. You
Well,
know,
that's why I think that it kind of shows the difference between a morality that's been based on empathy and a morality that's based on authoritarianism. It's like when you're getting to know someone, ask them a question like, if you created a sentient robot that you considered a living thing, would you have the right to turn it off, like, or do whatever you want with it? People that are
right.
more based on empathy tend to lean more toward, no, I don't have the right to mess with something once it's a living thing. And other more authoritarian people are like, well, yes, I created it, and if so be it, I can destroy it.
Well, your parents kind of created you, but if they're awful parents, that
Right.
doesn't mean that you should obey them. Absolutely. And yeah,
That's my counter argument and example when it
yeah,
comes up.
I'm sure you've all heard of the Euthyphro dilemma of Socrates, the Plato, right? You guys know
I'm
that
completely
the
ignorant.
Euthyphro
I know.
dilemma?
That's
Okay.
new to me.
Well, basically it goes asked a question. Socrates, was always asking questions. And he was asking about piety, which translates to morality kind of. What's good, what's pious? Is something good because God commanded it, or did God command it because it's good? So if it's just good because God commanded it, then it's arbitrary, and anything he commands is good, and the definition of morality, or the concept of morality, loses kind of all purpose or all meaning. Now, if God commanded it because it's good, then that means that good exists independently of any God because he chose that morality. You know what I'm saying? So it
Good
really
point.
really undercuts this divine command theory, that a lot of apologists like to employ.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's why they want God's perspective to be supposedly objective. Is to kind of fill that little gap.
Yeah. Growing up as a Christian, that wasn't really a paradox for me or a contradiction so much as it was just two parts of the same thing. It was just two different sentences that both describe how God deals with morality. If you looked at one rule and it was like, see, this is good, and God commanded it because it's good, and then I find something I don't agree with, and they're like, well, it's good because God commanded it, and God commands things that are good. So it's like it's extremely circular, and that
Yeah.
was the way that I was taught, growing up. And now, of course, that doesn't really add up. But
Yeah.
Right.
Another way of saying that is, does God have good reasons for his moral orders, basically? And if he has good reasons, we don't need God. We can go right to the reasons. You know what I mean? So, and I think reasons are a reason is a better foundation than just blindly obeying somebody. You know what I mean? That
Yeah, I want to
that
know why I'm doing something.
exactly. Yeah. And keeping it tied to humanity and verifiable aspects of the world that, is much better than some vague, you know, entity that nobody can define. And, obviously, also, it doesn't really make morality objective because we don't have objective evidence for any God. So all we have is these tribal, assertions about what their God says and wants. So humanism is actually much more objective than any religion because, you know, at least practically, because they're all contradictory. Humanism is based on human flourishing, and they're objective measures of what the well-being for humanity. So definitely,
Positive analysis.
yeah. So getting into another topic, so there are some black intellectuals, some black atheists who I kind of like. One of them is what's his name? Coleman Hughes. He's an atheist. He just started his podcast up like I don't know, like 8 months ago, and he's become really popular. He did an interview with he's got Neil deGrasse Tyson, Steven Pinker, Sam Harris was his first interview.
Oh wow.
Wow.
He makes comments like, you know, police violence is not really about race so much. Uh, uh, he has arguments like that that kind of anger some people. And another one is a guy named John McWhorter, who's a professor at I think Columbia, and he makes the same kind of claims. Uh, he's also an atheist, and he's actually a linguist, and he kind of, studies etymology, which I think is a very cool subject. But what do you guys think about that? Or they also talk about like anti-racism has become the new religion because it's like if you say anything out of line, if you ask any questions that don't, about the narrative, about the statistics or anything, you're ostracized, you're excommunicated. What do you guys think about that idea?
I would say I would agree, at least to the degree that I would say that police brutality is not exclusively a race issue. It is not exclusively a race issue. I mean, police brutality gives racists and gives a racially biased system the opportunity to carry out brutality disproportionately to Black people.
Yeah.
But it doesn't just affect Black people. I mean, there was something that circulated a while back, maybe a year or two ago or something like that, that a little boy was shot, a little white boy in a car, and it was not nothing violent had happened prior to that. So it was like the police, totally on their own, escalated it to the point of a shooting in which a little boy was killed, and that was obviously not racially motivated, but it was clearly still an act of police brutality, taking it way too far, escalating way too quickly without cause, trigger happy. And that is an issue that would probably still exist even if there wasn't a systemic racial issue. Police brutality would still be an issue. But
Yeah.
because the system is already stacked against people of color, it is also a race issue because, the police are part of that system. So police brutality affects Black people disproportionately more often.
Yeah. Any other comments about that?
Honestly, she summed up what
Yeah.
I was thinking probably
They-
better than I would have.
Yes.
They,
Exactly.
sorry.
Yeah, I don't, and I definitely don't have a lot of conclusive opinions about some of the details in this. So I'm just, this is one of the topics that I'm kind of just exploring and listening. Um, Now I listened to some of them, and it did make me think, did they kill these guys because they're black? Did they stand there and say, "I'm going to kill him because he's black"? And some of the officers around him are also officers that are not white. So it did make me think.
yeah.
I think we always want to keep thinking and being, again, tying our beliefs to reality. That's how we're gonna make effective change and really get at the root of problems and come up with productive solutions. I think.
Mhm.
Whether it's
So
possible or not, trying to remain as objective as possible.
right, yeah, that's what I mean. Absolutely, we're not
Yeah.
super objective most of the time. Actually, yeah.
I
Very good
do
point.
still I do still want to comment on the whole the anti-black movement, Black Lives Matter movement, whatever is the new religion, because I think that that's an interesting take as well.
Mhm.
What's up with that? I hadn't heard anything about that.
Did you watch? Anybody watch the video I shared?
I did.
I was able to. I had to do a factory reset on my computer.
John, I don't think I
Oh.
sent you that video.
Yeah, I kind of got involved at the last minute.
Yeah.
It was they said some stuff that I really didn't agree with, but I can't go into their whole speech. But basically, what you were saying earlier about how, if you dissent, then you're excommunicated or whatever, I find that really not to be true. For the most part, cancel culture is a thing. There are going to be people in the world, and an increasing number of them, because of social media, can band together and do it very loudly. But there will be people who basically, if you give a take that they don't like, then you're canceled, and then that's it. But I don't
Right.
think that that even applies to the majority of people. I think that most people are willing to uh, at least listen, as long as you're not saying what you're saying in an antagonistic, dismissive way, or you're indicating that you've made your decision and you've made your mind up and nobody's ever going to change it, or you're
Right.
saying something that is inherently bigoted. Like, as long as it's clear that this is like, okay, I've thought about this and these are my reasons, and I'm willing to be open to discussion about this. I find that the vast majority of the time, that's really not the case from most people. And I think it's kind of a case of nut picking, where you're like, oh, these are the most extreme people in this group. I'm going to say that's how the whole group acts.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, those are good points. And again, this is something that I'm thinking and listening about, and it's not something I can say too much conclusively about. Um, but I definitely have noticed in some areas an attitude that would kind of fit what they were talking about, how this is kind of replacing religion for some people. In a way, because again, the whole heresy, and you have to accept this narrative or you're thrown out, and it does tie back into cancel culture and things like that. And I think it's a good thing that people get fired over a lot of stuff. Before, you look in the 50s, you didn't see anybody represented but white people, and people could say, "Oh, I mean, that's why we have all these celebrities like John Wayne saying these
Right.
racist things, and now his statues are getting taken down." And that's great that that's changed, but you do have to ask the question, where do we draw the line? With the statues too, obviously take the Confederate statues down. I mean, they were put up, in a time when they were just trying to impose white supremacy. That's just historical fact. But
Yeah.
get to the founders, and it's a little more tricky, right? I mean, because these things are more of a bug than a feature, as they obviously were with Confederate leaders. Any
Yeah.
thoughts about that, John? See, we're trying to get the word in there.
Oh no, I'm just kind of nodding in agreement.
Yeah.
Here in
Yeah.
Austin, the University of Texas is implementing some changes to make things more diverse, but they're not, in my opinion, they're not going quite far enough. They've got, I can't remember the specific name, but they've got a couple of different buildings that are named after some Confederate uh, general or whatnot, or one of them was named after a guy who was a segregation. I can't talk straight. Segregationists. Y'all help me out here.
Segregationist?
Yes, thank you. I would get my tongue all twisted there. uh, and they UT has decided to keep the name, but add something to and put it in context. And my opinion on that, I think no, keeping the name is still honoring him, whether you think it is or not. I think they should ditch the name and then still add that context and say, here's why we removed his name and changed it. You know, why leave it and add context? You understand, Karen? That's what I think. Yeah.
I would tend to agree with that. I think that a lot of the people who are anti taking down statues and changing the names of things and stuff like that, I guess, are people who, at least from what I have seen, for the most part, they are people who are in a position where something like that has never affected them. You know, you don't see anything anti-white that stands as a monument of any kind in America.
Right.
That's not something that exists. That's not something that somebody would walk by and feel a twinge of like, why is that there? Why is something that killed people in my own family, why is that there? You know, they would, that's never a thought that's ever had to cross any of their minds. So it just doesn't really seem very apparent.
Yeah. I would say my biggest personal
exposed to it, like affecting them at all.
Yeah.
No. I would say my biggest personal thing with this issue is with Thomas Jefferson, because honestly I've been a big fan, or I don't know, maybe that's too. I've been a fan. I went to the Jefferson Memorial in D.C. when I was at the Reason Rally in 2016, and I ended up staying there for like 3 hours because they have all these displays with like quotes of his, these Enlightenment, great quotes of his, and at the same time, this contradiction. He did oppose slavery, and he called it an abomination, and he was one of the first people to try to pass laws against it, actually. But he was really a failure ultimately in that area. So
and
it's
he owned slaves.
Right. Yeah, he was in debt, and there's maybe a lot of reasons for that. But that he didn't, free them or whatnot. But that's a big one. It's tough. I can't really say somebody's wrong for saying that I'm wrong for, thinking of him as a positive influence. Carl Sagan talks about how he was a big fan of his, how he did so much for democracy and freedom of religion and secularism. So yeah, it's tough.
I kind of think of that.
Sorry, go ahead.
I kind of think of that as in the same way that I think of the fact that I'm not vegan, even though I've heard all of these arguments for why I should be, and I kind of think I probably should be, but I just don't have the self-discipline or the financial place in my
I've had
life
those
to
same
just
thoughts.
avoid meat. And I think that someday people might look back at me and be like, yeah, they did a lot of great things and they said a lot of great things for so and so and such and such, and they were an activist, but they were an avid meat eater. I mean, this person just loved steak. Anytime they went out to a fancy restaurant, they always ordered steak and they bragged about it. And that I can't get behind. And it's like, I know that I'm not a bad person, even though there may be things about me that could be considered more or less problematic. And I think that if you're looking, I mean, the thing about Jefferson is that he wasn't famous for owning slaves.
Right.
He wasn't famous for not successfully abolishing slavery. He was famous for writing the Declaration of Independence and for contributing to this country and to democracy.
And he has some of the best slides against Christianity in his letters. He absolutely.
Yeah. And if those are the things that you value him for, then what's the problem? The difference.
In a way, isn't that a good thing? Because it reinforces the fact that like the most liberal people generations ago were much more liberal than them now. And surely it's a good thing that some of the things that we do now will seem barbaric. If we keep going in the right direction, our ancestors will look at us as barbaric in some ways. So, and we keep this in mind when we look at people before us, and put that in context, and maybe not judge them on, by the same standards as us today. Maybe that's
Yeah, like I wanted to say, about like Newton, we can appreciate a person for some things that they did without, having that effect that we don't necessarily appreciate them for other things that they did. Like, I don't care that he didn't believe in the Trinity. I don't care about his forays into alchemy. I do care about calculus and his groundwork in physics and things like that. That was his contribution that I can get behind. And I don't have to like unilaterally love everything that Newton did or that Jefferson did or any person.
I honestly think that that's kind of a religious thing because, even the most flawed people in the Bible are held up as heroes worthy of imitation in every little way. And even the bad things they did are like, well, see, this is what you shouldn't do. So it's like, you look at, I was taught growing up basically to look at imperfect people as being perfect examples, essentially. And I think that carries over a bit as far as, you're if you look up to someone, then you have to look up to everything about them. So you're canceled if you like somebody that had any kind of problem.
I like that quote.
Exactly.
Yeah. How would that work if they applied it to like the patriarchs or something? It's like Jacob's story is like, okay, don't marry, two sisters and have them in fierce competition for who can bear the most children.
Yeah.
Like, is it a how, like, what not to do?
Oh, no. Those things were just not regarded as bad. Those things were just, it was the ladies' problem. That was their own problem if they were going to get competitive.
Oh, right. So it's a ladies' problem, so it doesn't matter that much.
Nobody would expect their sibling rivalry to transfer over into married life, being married to the same guy. No one would suspect that would happen.
No. Well, last topic of the day. Quick topic. What is your favorite aspect of the universe, or that you find the most fascinating?
I'm gonna say black holes.
Black holes?
To me, everything about the universe really just blows my mind. But specifically, one to know that black holes has to be my favorite because you got the law of conservation saying, all matter and all energy cannot be created or destroyed. It's merely transformed or whatnot. So black hole sucks in entire galaxies, crushes it down by massive gravity. But then what? What happens? What happens to that information, that material, that data that is still there?
Right. Yeah. John, you got one?
Well, honestly, play it a little close to home. My favorite part of the universe is the Earth and the fact that it's teeming with all these like fascinating life forms, humans included, that have all these really, really interesting ways of thinking about everything around them. I'm in a perfect spot to just kind of observe. I can see the universe from where I am. I can see all the living things crawling in the dirt when I go outside. My family's here. I'm getting to know all these people in the atheist community that think more like I do, and we can have interesting conversations. I'm getting to know more people in the Christian and Muslim communities, and when I find someone that like is fun to talk to, we can have really interesting conversations. So yeah, Earth is my favorite feature of the universe because all this stuff is here and I'm getting to experience it while I'm alive.
I like that.
Yeah.
I think my favorite part of the universe is all the shit we have no idea about yet.
Right?
It's like we have all these laws of physics that tell us how stuff works, and then we reach the limit of that and we're like, okay, so this isn't consistent. But then we figure out the laws for the consistency of when it becomes inconsistent. And then it's like all of the information that we know is like it gets up to a certain point where it's like, and this is the part we have not figured out yet. And to some degree, you don't know how much is just the limitations of the human brain, because obviously we're just monkey brains. I mean, we weren't really, our brains didn't evolve to understand the universe, and yet to some degree we do, which is crazy. And
Pretty
and
awesome.
there may be some degree to which we will never understand it because our brains just weren't made to get that. And it's like all of those unknowns are just limitless as far as we can tell. And it's like there's always going to be more stuff to figure out. There's always going to be room for improvement and innovation.
Yay. I like how you think.
Yeah, good answer.
I agree.
I think I would say time.
Ah.
Just time itself. When you think about what is time, and it really space-time. Einstein kind of showed space and time are part of the same fabric, and gravity warps space-time. But just forget the space-time. It's so just the fact that go back to like John, some of the stuff that you study a lot, like the ancient civilizations like Gilgamesh. The fact that those people used to exist, they were real. They weren't fiction. The whole world, we weren't here yet, and they were here. And I don't know, just thinking about that, it's just the vast time scales of geology, say, or just it's kind of mind blowing thinking about it.
It makes me wonder if time is like an emergent property of like the expansion of the universe, because gravity it affects it. So it's tied to other fundamental forces in the universe, and I find that endlessly fascinating.
Relativity is pretty weird.
Because we don't think of time as relative for where we are, because that pretty much is never something that we would observe in our day-to-day life at all. But that's another one of those things. It's like it's an unknown that's just like mind-blowing.
Speaking of Einstein, one of his most famous experiments proved just how time is relative to perception. They took two atomic clocks and flew them one around the world clockwise and one counterclockwise. And Einstein predicted that one would lose so many nanoseconds and the other one would gain so many. And the actual numbers that came back from the experiment were very close to the numbers he predicted.
That's fascinating.
Wow.
Yeah. One thing that I've read recently, I just read Brian Greene's book, Until the End of Time. And he was talking about how some scientists think that atoms have some type of proto-consciousness.
Really?
Atoms and molecules. Yeah.
Okay.
And it reminds me of one of my... Yeah, I think it's kind of far-fetched, but, I don't know. And he doesn't buy it either, but some scientists do subscribe to that. And it reminds me of Diderot in the Enlightenment. He kind of talked about evolution way before Darwin, and he talked about that, like maybe atoms, all matter has some type of innate, rudimentary proto-consciousness. So could he have been right? I don't know. I don't think so, but
I think unlikely.
But let me ask my pet rock.
Hey, are you conscious there, buddy?
Yeah. Like I said, I don't subscribe to that, but some scientists do. It's interesting.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. That's a great book, too.
Interesting.
I definitely recommend that. But I guess we're going to end there, guys. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for inviting
you're
me.
on Talk Heathen, Rudy. I don't know how many times you've been on there.
I've only been on it once. And
Really?
it's only because of COVID-19 that they've even, because I don't live in Texas. I wouldn't be able to go down to the studio in person, so it's the virus has kind of created an opportunity for them to have creators on that they normally wouldn't be able to because they wouldn't be able to come in. But
you like a call taker, right?
What was that?
You're a call taker.
I'm a moderator for the live chat as well.
Okay.
I also help out with that.
Cool.
And you do Atheist Experience also, right?
I haven't been on the Atheist Experience yet.
No, but you do like moderating, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you might get on there eventually. Yeah.
Maybe. But
That's pretty cool.
I pretty much help moderate all of the ACA show live chats when I have time.
Awesome.
I miss the in-person community. I only live about 6 to 8 blocks down and 2 streets over from the studio. Yeah,
Hey,
Bet you're
So
all
you've been
there every Sunday, right?
used to until COVID hit. I'm missing it bad. That
Yeah, I bet.
90% of my social life is digital, and pretty much the only life I have outside of my apartment, really, other than going to the doctor or the grocery store or convenience store, was the ACA on Sundays. Yeah.
Yeah.
and
That was
John, what is your channel?
Oh,
Your graphic.
I just have Jon Hammond on YouTube. I've sometimes like comedically retell stories from ancient mythology. I've covered most of Genesis and like the Epic of Gilgamesh. I touched on Medusa and like Osiris and Horus's stories and things like that. Lately, like okay, I serialized a couple of like sample chapters from a sci-fi story I'm writing, and I at the beginning of COVID, I posted a couple of karaoke videos because we were doing this quarantine karaoke thing to kind of lift each other's spirits. Um, and yeah, but other than that, it's I'm just spending all my time playing with my kids and working on Volume 2 of The Falling Star.
Yeah,
So
The Falling Star. That's on Amazon.
yeah, it's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, and that's just basically the Bible retold from the Satan character's perspective, so that we can get a bit more philosophical with it and kind of deconstruct it from the inside out, like in context, in chronological order, with illustrations and superpowered beings that are strong enough to throw each other through mountains for this big climactic finish that's coming up.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
This
pretty
seems
cool.
it does.
It's
It
what?
seems pretty cool, man. I think I'm gonna get that here pretty soon. Check it out.
Excellent.
And for whoever is interested, this is my book. You can see it. Really,
Justified
it's a
fate.
book I did with Atheist Republic. Just
Excellent.
kind of talking about the progress of humanity. Basically, belief in humanity is a justified faith in comparison with religious faith. Very influenced by like Steven Pinker and some of his work. So yeah. Well,
Cool.
thank you so much, everybody, for being on
Well,
thank
my
you for inviting me.
series
I had
here.
fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right. Thanks
Look
so
forward to
much.
100%.
seeing you again sometime. Bye, everyone.
Later.